It started like any other Tuesday. I had just come back from a long 36-hour rotation at the FEMA Coordination Center, where I oversee logistics for federal rescue operations. My work is intense, coordinating between local responders, military support, and medical evac units, but I've never once complained. My son, Lucas, is my reason. He's 10 years old, on the autism spectrum, and the bravest person I've ever known. He sees the world differently, more honestly, without filters or pretense. And he depends heavily on his service dog, Murphy, a golden retriever trained specifically to help with sensory regulation, panic episodes, and elopement prevention. That dog has saved Lucas more times than I can count. He's not a pet, he's essential. That morning, the skies were already churning. Weather models had warned of a fast-moving system, likely turning severe, but by the time I made it back to our small HOA-governed community, the winds had only just begun to stir. I was exhausted but relieved. I parked the SUV, waved at old Mr. Ellison from 2 doors down, and went inside to find Lucas and Murphy curled up on the couch watching cartoons. Everything felt normal. But, as I would later find out, something incredibly abnormal was already in motion. Around 2 p.m., I received an alert that a level 3 storm warning had been issued. I sent out a brief to my regional team and got on the phone with a few contacts about possible deployment scenarios. At the same time, I was preparing Lucas for the weather. He doesn't do well with sudden environmental changes, so I calmly walked him through our storm plan. Murphy, as always, was by his side, sensing the unease in the air. I set up Lucas's sensory tent in the living room, where he feels safe, and Murphy stayed close. At some point during all this, Lucas needed to go outside. Murphy is trained to escort him, so with my eyes still glued to the coordination dashboard, I let them into the backyard. Murphy always stays close. But within a few minutes, I noticed something strange. Lucas came back inside, alone. "Where's Murphy?" I asked. Lucas looked confused. "The lady took him." My heart dropped. "What lady?" He pointed vaguely toward the front yard. Still in my boots, I rushed out, calling Murphy's name, scanning the area. No sign of him. I ran to the front and noticed something that made my blood boil. One of those little passive-aggressive HOA violation slips stuck in our mailbox. This one was different, though. In red ink, it read, "No pets off leash, final warning." But Murphy wasn't off leash, he was with my son in our backyard. He was wearing his vest. And even if he had been momentarily loose, service animals are federally protected under the HOA. That's when I saw her. Karen. Her real name is Sandra, but everyone in the neighborhood calls her Karen behind closed doors. She's the HOA president, self-appointed neighborhood watch, and a chronic boundary pusher. The type who stares a little too long when someone new moves in and, accidentally, reports trivial landscaping code violations just to remind everyone who's in charge. She was standing in her driveway, arms folded, watching the storm clouds roll in. I approached her as calmly as I could, though every part of me was coiled tight. "Did you see a golden retriever come through here?" "He was just with my son." She tilted. Lightning split the sky in jagged veins as the storm intensified, wind howling like a wounded animal. My boots splashed through the rising puddles along the sidewalk as I rounded the corner of our street, soaked to the bone but singularly focused. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Another update from the tracking chip in Max's collar. He was moving, slowly, somewhere along the south edge of the neighborhood. My heart thudded in my chest as I picked up speed. I knew this route like the back of my hand. I'd walked it every morning with Max and my son, Jordan, ever since Max had completed his service dog training. Max was more than just a dog. He was Jordan's anchor. Diagnosed with nonverbal autism at age 3, my boy had lived in a world of terrifying unpredictability until Max came into his life. The golden retriever had a calmness, a wisdom, a gentleness that melted Jordan's fear. With Max beside him, Jordan could go into stores, classrooms, and noisy public parks. The dog could sense an oncoming meltdown, nudging or applying pressure therapy before it spiraled. Max had saved my son, more than once. So when I returned home earlier that evening after a supply drop at the base, a trip that had taken longer than expected due to the tropical storm rolling in, and found Max missing, panic kicked in. Jordan had been crying, gesturing wildly to the back door. The leash still hung on its hook. The storm was already raging. Max never went out in storms voluntarily. He was trained for emergency calm but hated the thunder. Something was wrong. I accessed Max's GPS tracker. His last ping had been just 2 blocks away. Then I noticed the message on our community HOA board app. Dog left in community shed, owner neglecting storm safety, removed for animal welfare. It was posted by Karen Tillman, the head of our HOA. I recognized her profile picture instantly. Short platinum bob, stiff smile, permanently furrowed brow. Karen, the self-appointed protector of the neighborhood, whose obsession with regulation had driven multiple residents to move out. She once fined me for leaving my trash bins out 10 minutes past collection. Apparently, she'd seen Max tied to our back porch, which, I realized in horror, must have happened during Jordan's meltdown while I was gone. Max must have gone outside voluntarily, sensing Jordan's distress. He knew how to unlatch the sliding door, but he couldn't lock it behind him. Karen, in her misguided crusade, must have assumed neglect. She rescued him, and instead of bringing him inside, left him locked in the community's tool shed. A metal-roofed box with no insulation or ventilation. That shed had no lighting, no drainage, no airflow. And Max, trained though he was, wasn't immune to fear. He was still a living being. A gentle dog caught in a thunderstorm, alone, terrified, locked away by someone who thought they knew better. The thought of it fueled my legs to move faster. The GPS ping grew closer. I turned down the path that led to the maintenance yard. The gate was slightly ajar, someone had been there recently. I reached the shed, heart hammering in my throat. I fumbled with the padlock, fingers trembling with a mix of rage and urgency, finally forcing it open. Max was inside, curled into the farthest corner, soaked and shivering. His eyes lit up when he saw me. A low, grateful whine escaped him as he limped over, not injured, but stiff from the cold and fear. I dropped to my knees, wrapping my arms around his damp body, whispering reassurance into his fur. He leaned against me with all his weight, grounding himself in my scent. I could already feel the stress bleeding from his trembling frame. I brought him home immediately, toweling him off and checking his vitals like I'd done with rescue animals overseas. Jordan ran to us as soon as we walked in, and Max leaned down, nuzzling him. My son stilled instantly, pressing his forehead to Max's. A silent connection passed between them, one I never pretended to understand but always respected. Karen didn't know, couldn't have known, that I was part of a federal animal rescue unit. That I had years of experience with traumatized service animals. That I had trained Max myself in coordination with certified specialists, tailored to Jordan's needs. That her heroic act had risked a dog's life and a child's mental health in one move. But ignorance doesn't excuse negligence. I gave myself an hour. 1 hour to ensure Max and Jordan were calm. Then I changed into my dry field gear, not for intimidation, but because I was soaked, and I knew where I was going. Karen's porch light was still on when I approached her pristine white house. I knocked, firmly but politely. She opened the door, wearing a smug expression that quickly faded when she saw me. Max stood beside me, his harness back on, calm but alert. I assume you're here about the dog, she said, folding her arms. Yes, I replied evenly. The service dog you locked in a storm shelter with no ventilation. He's a federally registered animal, protected by ADA and state law. Removing him without due cause constitutes interference with a medical aid, and that is a felony in some jurisdictions. Karen sputtered, her mouth opening and closing. I'm not here to start a neighborhood feud, I continued. But you will issue a formal written apology to my family. You will remove that post from the HOA board. And if you ever interfere with my son's medical assistance animal again, I will pursue this through every legal channel available. I thought he was abandoned, she started. You thought wrong, I interrupted. And you didn't check. You didn't knock on the door. You didn't call animal control. You took it upon yourself to decide what was best. That's not help. That's hubris. Karen didn't reply. Her gaze fell to Max, who stood unwavering beside me, as if he understood the gravity of this moment. You're lucky he's trained to endure stress. Another dog would have died in that shed. I turned without waiting for a response. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA's regional board. I sent documentation, including Max's registration, GPS logs, timestamps, and medical necessity letters. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because people like Karen, with unchecked authority and no understanding of disability or trauma, pose a risk, not just to us, but to any vulnerable family in the neighborhood. The next morning, a typed note appeared on our doorstep. I regret my actions and apologize sincerely. I now understand the seriousness of what I did. It won't happen again. No signature. But I knew. Max is fine now. Jordan's smile is back. But I added another level to our home security system. I don't expect Karen to understand, even now. But I learned something too. Not all rescues wear uniforms. Some wear collars, and some wear smug smiles, but only one of them knew what they were doing that night.